Welcome to the COMC Community Spotlight Show. Of course, it's presented by the great folks at Central Ozarks Medical Center, where your health is their mission. And speaking of health, we've got Becki Jennings with us, the Jennings Insurance Group, where you deal with insurance, you deal with financial planning, a lot of different stuff, but it kind of started with the insurance.
It did, yeah.
I think, yeah.
Health insurance, particularly Medicare, is really the backbone of the agency. You know, a lot of times people will come to us because they have a deadline. Their deadline is, oh my gosh, I'm turning 65. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And they want to know, if I stay on my employer plan, do I get penalized? And how soon do I have to sign up for things? And am I supposed to take Social Security? And all these questions happen. And so really, a lot of times people come into the agency at that turning 65 mark so that they can make sure that they're making the decisions when they need to.
Yeah, because there's so much information and disinformation out there.
There is.
And people think, oh, if I don't do this right, I'm going to miss out on this for the rest of my life, or I'm going to be penalized with that.
Yeah.
And the government runs everything, so that makes everything all the more screwy.
Right.
You know.
A lot of times people think, oh, I'm going on Medicare, everything's free.
Yeah.
And that is in fact not how that works.
No, it's not how that works, right? Okay. And that's such an important thing.
It is.
For people today, is to have somebody they can trust, they can go to and say, I don't know how this works. Can you bring me through this? And you and your team can do that. So we've done previous shows talking about how you started the business, kind of just winging a prayer out of, the trunk of your car kind of a thing. It's the great story that you could make a movie out of. But along the way, you've grown and you've kind of become a business leader. A lot of people look up to you for advice and how do you do this? How do you do that? And just in reading over your stuff, you had some really good business acumen advice to offer people. Like, the two most important things are grit and tenacity, I think, is what you like to say. And the other thing is that we can be our biggest obstacle. Right?
That is true.
In
we
business.
can.
How so?
A lot of times we get in our own way, and people who do this are already knowing that they do this.
Right.
And a lot of us do. We get in our own way. We make a plan and we think this is the only plan that there is, and maybe there does need to be some adjustments as we go, or we give up too soon. I see that happen a lot. People just give up a little too soon. Sometimes they just have no more resources or what have you. But sometimes people just get discouraged and they just say, well, this is never going to work. I'm out. I think for me, probably the opposite of an obstacle, probably the thing that has kept me going as long as I have is my faith. I do believe that I personally pray about everything I do, every decision I make. And I try very hard to make sure that I'm listening to that still small voice, and making decisions based on, those types of things. I think that's very important, because if I'm doing everything I know to do, and even when things haven't really in the moment worked out, so many times I go back and realize that experience has helped me in my future endeavors.
Yeah.
And sitting here, I can't think of a time when those things that I really diligently prayed about and sought guidance on, even if they didn't appear to work out in the moment, I can't think of a time that didn't come to my advantage at some point down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting, and our society has changed so much over the years, where it used to be looked at, to be a person of faith was a strength, and in recent decades, a lot of times you get made fun of for that. It's just kind of been a change in thought. Sometimes you got to be strong and hang in there with those beliefs like that, whatever those beliefs might be, but certainly faith, and stand on that, right?
Well, these are very different concepts. There is a faith in an almighty God, and then there's a hope on a fairy godfather.
Yeah, right.
Those are two very different things. And when you have a very deep faith in a deity that that guides the world, that's very different than a wish and a prayer. on something that may or may not even exist.
And that kind of plays into your, sometimes we get in our own way, and the confidence is important, either too little or too much.
That's true.
Sometimes, and if you've got that faith, it can really help that.
That is true. And faith doesn't replace that. There's many times when I've thought I was going down a certain road or another, and all of a sudden just there was a roadblock, and I said, no, that isn't the way.
Right.
And I can tell you some very interesting stories about some of those things. But that to me, I think is really where my strength comes from and what has kept me going. And people have shown up in my world. Opportunities have shown up that came from basically nowhere.
Right.
And I just have been very, very fortunate.
Grace of God, absolutely. I hear that you love to travel.
I do.
Right?
Yes.
We're talking vacation travel, or is this like going climbing mountains travel? What are we talking about?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because, yes, I love to travel anytime. So I also like to, watch my dollars. And so a lot of times I will tack on extra days when I go to conferences and things like that.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So, I might be attending a conference in New Orleans, which happened last year or so. And I tacked a few days onto the front of it and, went out and did the alligator thing and, looked at all that stuff.
Alligators.
So,
Whoa.
yeah, that was really interesting out on the airboat or jet boat
Oh,
things,
yeah.
And so I love to do that. Anytime I have an excuse to experience something. I went to the Dominican Republic a couple of years ago, which was extremely fun, and had a great time there. And so, yes, I do very much love to travel and have new experiences, whether it's with people or by myself, or I've got a favorite resort in San Diego I like to go to, that type of thing. So,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking with Becki Jennings, the Jennings Insurance Group. So many wonderful stories. So we'll continue when we come back on the COMC Community Spotlight Show. At COMC, your health is our mission. Central Ozarks Medical Center offers 3 OBGYNs at the Osage Beach Clinic and 2 pediatricians with same-day appointments available. At COMC, our doors are open to everyone with 5 primary care locations conveniently located across the Ozarks. COMC for the best medical, dental, and behavioral health care. Get more info on how COMC can help you at centralozarks.org. COMC, where your health is our mission. If it's happening at the lake, it's happening on Lake TV. From the polar plunge to festivals, parades, aquapalooza, and boat shows, Lake TV has it all. Even the granddaddy of them all, the shootouts. If you're looking for places to party, things to do, or even a new home to move into, you've gotta love Lake TV.
You're watching Lake TV.
Welcome back to the COMC Community Spotlight Show. We're talking with our friend Becki Jennings, Jennings Insurance Group. We've had her on the show a couple of times now. We were talking earlier, you like to travel.
I do.
And sometimes you're really smart. You tack a couple of days on to a business trip here
Yes.
or a business trip there. You attend a whole lot of legislative stuff.
I do, actually, and I've been to Washington, D.C. a number of times.
I'm sorry.
And it's very interesting going to Washington, D.C. A few years ago, I went, and there was a lot of protesting that particular year. And I had never been in a protest. And I'm like, I think I'm going to get in this protest. And so...
You didn't go into the Capitol building, did you?
No.
Okay, good.
It was before that. And so I went in, I attended this protest. I never did figure out what they were protesting, but it was quite interesting. And I've been able to, see a lot of things in Washington, D.C. and experience a lot of that. But I go there actually for a reason. And the reason is because I lobby, I communicate with our legislators on behalf of my clients. And so whether we're talking about employee benefits and tax advantages for small employers, or we're talking about things like the donut hole with regard to Medicare Part D, or all those types of things. You know, we visit with our legislators. We have conversations with them about, you know, maybe some things that their constituents are telling us, and then we can communicate that with them. And so we'll be going again at the end of February. So I should have some really great information with regard to the new administration and sort of what's happening. There's a lot of fear out there, you know, my gosh, my current condition, my current health condition isn't going to be covered anymore.
Right.
You know, we have every time there's a new administration, all these same things circle back around.
Yep.
And generally speaking, when we come back from that event and we learn what legislators are really thinking, and we communicate what our clients are worried about, we usually can calm those fears and move things along. This is going to be an interesting year because of the new administration, the House and the Senate. All of that is going to prove to be a very interesting year, I think.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, every time there's a new administration, that means there can be just upheaval in the way
Right.
everything is done.
It can.
Right? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, when Obama was in and he brings in Obamacare, and that just changed the whole face of the whole thing.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because in 2010, that's when Obamacare passed. And frankly, I wasn't really in tune to it. I was only doing Medicare. I didn't think it was going to make much difference. It, in fact, adjusted every aspect of health insurance across the board. A lot of agents and brokers left the industry. A lot of fear, a lot of frustration happened. And so they've talked many times about how do we get rid of Obamacare, right?
Right.
When you realize that most young adults have never known anything else.
Yeah.
And basically to untangle that is a bit like unweaving a basket. So there's a lot of things that have to be taken into account in order to change huge legislation like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And again, we've said it before, usually when the government gets involved, it just gets more tangled up.
Yes, it does.
And you need more of an expert
Yes.
to help you kind of get through it. So you've got the Jennings Insurance Group. You also own another business, KeyEstateDocs.com. What is that?
Yeah, I have two partners in this business, and basically it is a way to work through the process for wills and trusts.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not for everyone, and we don't give, legal advice or anything like that, but it is an avenue that is very affordable that a lot of people have been utilizing. But more importantly, another thing we do is we help agents and brokers, advisors around the country who want to implement this into their firm,
Yeah.
and we help them be able to do that as well. And it just gives them a better, it deepens the relationship with the client and gives them a better understanding of what the client has going on with regard to all of those.
It's kind of like an extension of the Jennings Insurance Group. I mean, you're dealing with insurance, you're dealing with a lot of that anyway. This is like just as you move on in life, you're going to have to deal with this too.
It's true. And a lot of times when we speak to people as they're retiring, it gets into conversations like, do you have a medical directive? Things like that. And sometimes people want to implement those items and they haven't yet, or they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Or it's cost prohibitive or what have you. And we can help them with that.
But it's so important, right? I mean, if you leave these things unanswered now, somebody else is going to come up with the answer later, whether you like it or not.
If you don't have a plan for your financial future or after you pass away, the government does.
Yeah. You probably don't want that, right?
Probably
that
not.
might not work out best
You might
for
want to voice your opinion.
you and your family, right? Okay. So we've got the Jennings Insurance Group. We've got KeyEstateDocs.com. If folks want to get more information on this, how do they go about that?
Well, they can call our office, 573-693-9443. There are 8 people who work in our office, so it's not just me. Many of the people who work there have been there for 3 to 5 years, so we have some very experienced people there. They can go online, JenningsInsuranceGroup.com. You can go to our social media pages. We try to update relevant information. We don't just muddy up our news feed. We try to put relevant information for folks. So there's many ways. And ultimately, you can walk into our office in Osage Beach and talk to somebody right then if you have questions.
There you go. Becki Jennings, she's so nice. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you for joining us for the COMC Community Spotlight Show.